So I think we're just chilling. Found some time to actually stream. So hopefully we can just watch some of these videos that we have like a backlog here of videos that came up on stream. So I would like to do that. I've been making a ton of videos from previous streams, and now I just need to set up all those releases on YouTube. Some of the videos that I made, I've edited into short form formats, but I need to set up TikTok and figure out how I can maybe post to both YouTube and TikTok at the same time, or if that's even what I want to do, because usually on these upload pages, there's a lot of platform specific properties or fields to set. Another thing that I want to pay attention to on stream, just from editing these videos, is that I use words such as like, and I say the phrase "you know" a lot, and I want to try to cut that out. One, because I think it sounds bad in general. Two, because it makes it harder for me to edit these videos, and that's not good. It's just taking up extra time. So I wanted to do, okay, TikTok hunt. I think this was look at the videos that we currently have posted on the channel and see if we could get TikToks from, or clips, short form. Could we get anything between like 1 minute and 3 minutes from these other clips? Oh my gosh. And then, yeah, and then watch videos. I think I'll start with the watch videos and then we could go to that. I still need to make the Substack monthly update. I need to get these updates back, and we will need to post the videos. I'm kind of curious how this is going to work with adding more content here, if people are going to care about that. How do we get the subscriber growth? How do we get subs up? I don't know how that works, but we'll see. We'll learn. And yeah, this week we're going to be looking at automatic behavior, emotion regulation. What is this going to be? Is this watching the Dr. K video? Okay, so then maybe today we could do the Alex O'Connor. We could do consciousness stuff again. We could do David. We'll do David Bentley. We have to look for any new GACT videos. That's a #1 priority, actually. GACT. Yo, you could do new Epstein revelations. How's it going, James One? I think it's a little too it's not even too political. It's just too out of scope. It would be, and it's just so dark. It's so dark. I keep finding out more stuff about this new release, and it is just some of the worst stuff that you'll ever hear in your life. And yeah, it's important that people are aware of it. It's important that people are aware of who was alleged or who these emails imply are involved. But I think it's a little too dark for this stream. We're into this stuff, you know. And yet it's layered deeply into our societal structures, it appears, right? And that's not great. Now, it's not surprising, just knowing that humans are capable of what they are. But hopefully we can disentangle it. You know, we'll see. I'd imagine that that's not also the only type of operation that's doing something similar. We just need to hopefully create some sort of moral norm that, or maybe not moral norm, but a societal norm that this is something that is it should be whatever, career ending or presidency ending. But unfortunately, I don't think as a country we're ready for that one. It's part of why it's interesting to get a deeper understanding of human psychology, but also difficult to learn to accept. Right? Yeah. I feel like I'm in a nice privileged place where I'm past the, I'm past the loss of innocence on this one. I think learning about World War II and that Japanese unit, stuff like that gets you past that gets you to lose your innocence real quickly. So yeah, it's surprise. I don't think that things just go away even during peacetime like this. So I'm sure that people are still doing all kinds of stuff, and then also all the stuff with ICE that we keep learning about, where they're straight up torturing people and doing just absolutely terrible things, and we don't even know where everyone is. We don't know what they're doing in a lot of these cases. So it's a real problem. The issue with World War II is that it's easy for people to compartmentalize it and think we've grown out of it, right? Especially people who are being born and people from like my generation. You could get, or even the generation prior, like anyone born within the past 40 years could just be naive and think that we're out of it, because that's so much easier to accept. All right, let's clean this off. We'll be in the snow if you need us. Very nice. They're just booling. They're just chilling out. Could add this to watch later. So we have this David Bentley Hart video that Dharmadom sent. We've got, I think, this Alex O'Connor video. Maybe we watch the Sam Harris one if we can. I'm gonna save the state of mental illness in 2025 to Wednesday, which covers emotion regulation. I will not be streaming on Thursday. Okay, we move that to next Thursday. I will be streaming this following week. Oh, what am I missing? So I think I've seen a Gacked video where there's more than one cat, but it could just be one cat, one dog. Yeah, it's always important that we keep that type of understanding in the back of our minds, even though it's not important to always talk about it. Like, hopefully this channel is going to be a little more uplifting, but we can't just throw that away. That's always going to be
hypothesis non-finger.
Whoa, that's always going to be there. We always have to be keeping our eyes peeled for that type of behavior. That's why I think it's really important that even from the ground up, even a community like this, we want to ensure that toxicity does not take hold, because that can influence the entire community in such a way where, when stakes are much higher than it just being a community that we have to moderate, that hopefully it leads to more wholesome, empathic people. Oh man. Okay, so here we got two cats. The snow cat of our dreams. Are they actually drawn to this thing, or are these all set up? Okay, I should have been liking these. Dream More, music by me. Recorded 119. Oh, so these are coming in a little later. There's a backlog of gacked videos. Yeah, because negativity is so prevalent in the media and news, it's important to consider tactics to deal with it without just ignoring it. A very difficult balance. Yeah, it is tough. That is for sure. I think it always helps if there is some sort of positive direction. It can't just be blind hope. It's got to be, this is something we can do, either directly about it, David, or just in general things that we can do in our lives that can ideally counteract that. So, all right, what are we doing here? Does consciousness defeat materialism?
I did my doctorate in neuroscience many decades ago, and I've enjoyed over the last several decades to see more and more serious scientists recognize that they're going to have to come up with different kinds of theories other than what I dealt with, the neurophysiology, neurochemistry of the cerebral cortex, to figure out what consciousness is. From your perspective, as a philosopher, a scholar of theology, how important is to discern what the deep nature of consciousness?
So who's talking here? I'm guessing this is David Bentley Hart. We don't know who that is. Yo, Dharmanam, what's good? Glad you made it in time. I was thinking today we can just catch up on videos. I don't know the other guy, physicist. Yeah, I'd imagine. I would already, so I you know, obviously we talk about this stuff all the time. I would already not accept his premise that the scientists need to switch anything up here when talking about consciousness. I think we've got a good sense of consciousness as far as the physical stuff, but Robert Sapolsky has some quite interesting observations on free will versus determinism. Ooh. So I'm in the middle of his book Behave, and this is gonna keep me for a while because this book is huge. Yep, kind of big. Now I'm excited for the book that comes after this. This book is pretty good, and I'm enjoying it a lot. But this book is for learning about the brain. Like this is where you learn basically the stuff that I've been looking at for a while, and in the level of detail where I'm still learning more stuff, which is great. But I think he's got a book that comes out since then that is his like commentary on it. Here we go. Yeah, determine. I'm guessing this is what you're talking about, and this is what I'm interested in. So I will read this after. Am I a fast reader? I'm not a fast reader, but I can read every day. So I am reading at a rate of about 1% of that book a day. So that's not much, but we will get there. And if I could find extra time, I'll try to read more than that. But this might be a couple months of reading. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm excited for this one. I'm guessing this is what you're alluding to, and yeah, I'm pretty. I know this sounds terrible, and I should be more open-minded when it comes to some of this stuff. But given the understanding that I feel like I now know that is coming from even Sapolsky, and also just aligned with what Sapolsky's been saying so far, it's going. I'd imagine that his view on free will is going to be quite similar to mine, except for the fact that perhaps he won't take a similar route to how we can then leverage our understanding in the same way that I do. But you never know, because he's dropped hints in Behave that point out some sort of optimism regarding our behavior, our automatic behavior. Like he's building up this idea that when we make a decision or when we behave in a certain way, that our experience in that moment is just a small piece of what's contributing to that behavior, which is kind of what I talk about, where we are predisposed to experience and behave in the world in each moment. So there are effects of whatever it is, chemicals 5 days ago that are affecting how you behave today, or you know, you could go all the way back to upbringing, or you could go back to genetics. And so what does that mean towards free will? And yeah, we have basically that same general view in the document, so I don't think there's going to be anything crazy. I just finished Manual of Insight. I'm halfway through Bentley Hart's book. Nice. That means you probably take the words in more deeply, right? Not necessarily. That's one way to say it. It could just be also. So okay, I guess I should first of all say that I think my reading comprehension increases when I'm using Vyvanse, which I've only started using about almost 2 years ago. Then also, reading at the very end of the day is probably slightly less optimal than if I were to wake up and start reading after having taken Vyvanse. So that would be the optimal way to go about this. But when I wake up, I usually try to work on the stream or something related to work that needs to be done, whether that is on the document or getting... recently, it's literally just been making content, editing from previous streams. Though he takes determinism to the extreme to my knowledge, he definitely changed my view on the amount of free will we have as humans. More so or less so than you'd expect, or than you expected. Yo, Onion Helmet, scroll and chat, and the first thing I see is Epstein. Absolutely, it's going to be a good day. Hell, that's one way to look at it. Well, you could say that we can only go up. Stan realized that he needs to drain the swamp if he wants to give people real freedom. Yeah, unfortunately, we are decoupled from whatever swamps are out there and institutions. At least until we finish this document. Then maybe we can jump towards something else. But we are pretty enclosed, pretty secluded. I like your shirt rotation. You're saying my shirt rotation? Have I worn this one in a while? I'm actually wearing two shirts. This is another usual shirt that I wear. But blue long sleeve shirt, orange long sleeve shirt, white t-shirt, shirt with special speech mark. Yeah, it's I just kind of do whatever. I'll switch it up too. I've got shirts that I don't usually wear on stream that I could just start throwing in there. But I'm usually going for comfort, and then how nice can we look while also just being comfortable? If human behavior is very deterministic, the ethical choice would be for the strong individuals to make sure that that the basic needs of the weak individuals are met, in my opinion. I agree. Granted, I think we should be careful about like strong individual, because it's a multi-dimensional view. Right, we need to consider what strong would mean here, and I think if we were to really steelman that, we're looking at people with you could take a look at the view of like straight up power in terms of how much they can do towards people's lives or wealth or whatnot. Yeah, how much I don't know. We can go in a bunch of different perspectives, though I think, yeah, if you have additional wealth or power in any sort of way, then I do think that perhaps perhaps you should have an ethical responsibility to help those out. Now, granted, once again, this is just that's me. The document can't say that, but I generally push a morality of empathy and charity. It's literally my rotation, but with different colors. Nice. I've come to terms with there being much less free will than I used to think. The measure, yeah, and the tricky thing is, like, what would be then the useful way to think about free will? So we know that we obviously can't change. So in the document, I say there's two ways of thinking about free will that we have to say we are straight up just wrong. Like, we don't have complete freedom over the physical world beyond what we can physically interact with and what that allows. So I can't just manifest things in the world. And then also, we don't have free will over the thoughts that we have in each moment. And we get there by a simple mindfulness exercise where we notice that our brain is just throwing stuff at us constantly. It is coloring our entire experience, whether that is our emotions or the very thoughts that arise. Even when we're like making a decision, the two choices, where did those come from? So we push a form of free will, or a way of thinking about free will, a conceptualization of free will that allows us to consider the intuitive notion that we have freedom to do things, right? Like, I kind of understand this idea that I could pick up this pen and I could write with it. So just in that bit. Now, granted, we know that those very thoughts came from prior events. It wasn't necessarily I wasn't free in having those thoughts, but this is where I'm at. So you could recognize the constraints that our lack of free will has given us, and then we can leverage this understanding of freedom that we do have, or at least feel like we have. And the question is, like, what, given all that we know about what affects our experience in the moment, what must we do to feel as though we have freedom? Like, what's the way to go about that? Yeah, I'll just leave it there. The measure of a society is how it treats its weakest members. Ooh, who said that? Because that's a banger. But the American dream philosophy becomes ethically problematic if we find out free will is very limited. Right? Yeah, we need that's why I think it's really important that we cover this topic of consciousness at the level that we do. Like, I think there are ethical implications for pointing out how deterministic our consciousness is. I don't think that's the only thing that'll become problematic if there's no free will. Wrong. I heard Jung say that we are so at the whim of unconscious forces that we basically don't have free will. Right? Well, yeah, I would ask, what does free will mean then? You know, if you're going to think about free will in terms of some determinism, then it's a clear-cut zero. It's a clear-cut no. Free will or not, I'm eating that cookie. I've seen it being attributed to Gandhi, but I don't know. All right, what do we got?
It really is.
Well, how important is it, since it is everything for us, we have no world but the world that comes to us in consciousness. It seems like it should be the most important question of all, perhaps. And it's one I've been engaged in for the past few years, especially, so it seems exceedingly important to me. But I think that it does provide the most significant and most communicable problem with a simple materialist reductionism, a simple reduction of all phenomena to mechanical physical causes. In part, this is because the mechanical picture of nature is originally a picture created by removing mental phenomena from our picture of nature and the distinguishing marks of the mental. But also because when you undertake a scrupulous phenomenology of conscious acts, you find qualities that seem to be impossible to reconcile with the purely mechanist or physicalist or whatever we're going to call it picture of the natural order. And sometimes, perhaps these things should be obvious because consciousness is obvious in the sense it's something we all do. But precisely because it's so obvious, precisely because it is everything we do in a sense, the problems aren't always immediately obvious to us.
Well, look, let me, in the specific aspects of the brain, you take out a certain part of the brain, you lose that function. And so this is something that nobody denies, absolutely certain, that you have this very high correlation between being able to see in a certain part of the brain or being able to feel in a certain part of the brain. So on its surface, there looks like there's a direct correlation.
There may be a direct correlation, but correlation and causation aren't exactly the same thing. And the phenomenon of consciousness is different from the capacity for it, logically speaking. I don't think there are any pure Cartesians out there. There may be, but those who really think that there's a soul substance that's so ontologically distinct from the material that it really is just sort of like an alien inhabiting
Yeah, so the whole correlation causation issue goes away if we find more neural correlates of conceptual thought. I think that's really the thing that's missing that people really want to hold on to. You know, you could say, oh, you know, we know that these parts of the brain are involved in these types of experiences. However, there's something that's giving it the essence, right? There's something else somewhere that's giving it the information. And if we can now find correlates, which I think we currently can to a significant level, if we could find correlates that specifically involve the contents of our thoughts, then we have pretty much everything. Like when there's still a chance that some third party is providing some substance, but what is the substance? Because now it's not the contents of your thought, it's not the feeling of your thought, it's not the linguistic aspect of your thought, it's not the emotions, it's not the feelings of anxiety, it's not the feelings of associatedness, it's not the feelings of profoundness, because we can explain that through correlates. Wouldn't more correlates be more correlates? Right. There's so many correlates, though, that we can't... They could all be correlates still, right? They could all... None of these tell us causation, but what is missing, you know? Like, what people are looking for is, I think, something that makes sense of the profound feelings they have, or something that makes sense of these objective rules. And, you know, once we point out that the rules aren't objective because everything is being conditioned, and we point out that every single aspect of our conscious experience can be pointed to the very specific parts of the brain that deal with those aspects, then the only thing that's missing, we don't have it. There's nothing. Except it's still, there could still be something missing. We just can't make sense of what could possibly be missing. I think Nagel points out what's missing, right? What it's like to be that thing. What it's like to be that thing. Yeah, I might just not be. I might not be effective at explaining this type of recursive nature of how an organism that can map mappings recursively, how that would actually lead to something that is trying to make sense of its own experience. So it's at a point where the whatever consciousness is, as far as we can tell, it's this distributed information. It's causing thoughts that aren't aware of other things in the system. The thoughts are simply the information being mapped, and it's information going to different areas, and it's causing an entire propagation of experience that we have. It wouldn't be aware of the entire mechanism, you know? It would simply just be information. So this idea that our consciousness is like that the physical mechanism is missing the aspect of what it's like to be that thing, to me is unintelligible, because that's the whole point. what's being made conscious here is just that. It's just the experience. Our information and quality are the same. In the way that I just described it, yes. Now, granted, that puts us real close to an integrated information theory point of view, but I'm not trying to say it's just information. I'm trying to say that the activation of the distributed activity across our brain is the qualia. And the thoughts that we are having, that we are a thing that has thoughts, are simply the developed thoughts that this type of mechanism could have, and that developed over a long period of time as cultures developed, and as the brain developed over evolution, developed the mechanisms to actually have those types of thoughts. So it almost makes sense that you wouldn't be able to self-consciously think about what you are, what consciousness is, until the frontal cortex developed as complexly as it has. And you don't see those as possible in a philosophical zombie. And you don't see those. Yeah, perhaps I'm missing something. My understanding of the philosophical zombie is it's not. You can't have a philosophical zombie with the same physical mechanisms as the non-philosophical zombie. A human only becomes a philosophical zombie once you start damaging parts of the brain. That was kind of the whole point of that section in the video I made. And then the question, you sure? And the answer to that is never a yes. We're not certain. So this goes back to what we're allowed to think now. Like, what does the information that we do have imply? It implies what, most likely? And seems circular. I think that's kind of the point. Like, information mapping is circular in the sense that it becomes quite complex, and the information that, the self-conscious information would not be aware of the system. You would only know that by the fact that you and others aren't philosophical zombies. All right, I'm struggling to understand what the puzzle here. I might need it to be reframed. In my mind, we just know enough about the brain to understand how affected our current understanding of the physical world and our own conscious is by our development and our culture and what we've learned and how we've been conditioned. All right, I'm gonna continue though, because I don't find Nagel compelling. I do not know. The fork started. Which, are we talking the hard problem fork, or? I don't think, I know this is terrible because I really don't know Nagel well enough, but I think that view doesn't appreciate the type of argument that's being made towards the homeostasis view of consciousness. Like, we have an effective view of how consciousness could come about following that view of homeostasis. This is a mechanism that we see in every single organism, and we have some intuitive sense how it would have helped our species to survive. Nagel to me refutes the idea that with 100% perfect knowledge of the brain, then something is still missing. And something, yeah, these are just different domains. Like we can learn 100% about something, and we wouldn't be able to understand what it. Yeah, I'm trying to think of how, like, what's an effective way of this is a little bit. I think I understand what you're getting at, though. We can know 100. Actually, first of all, I should say this: it's impossible. So this leads us back to the philosophical discussion of knowledge in itself. We can't know 100% about anything. That's just not how knowledge works, given what we know about learning and what our philosophy has told us in the past 500 years. It's incoherent to think about there being some 100% of knowledge. Like, knowledge is a discrete set. A discrete set. That's not how knowledge works. That's not what knowledge is in the most fundamental way. So we can first dispel that. We can't have 100% perfect knowledge of the brain. Then the second thing would be, nevertheless, we could have, no matter how much knowledge we do have of the brain, we will still never feel what that brain is feeling. So I do think the whole argument here, the real problem of consciousness argument that Anil Seth brings up, is that there is an amount of knowledge that we can have about the brain where we don't feel as though we need to know anything extra in order to understand consciousness. That after we learn enough about neural correlates where we could see, okay, this is why a conscious mind would have these types of thoughts. This is why the conscious mind would wonder about its own consciousness. Like, once we get to that point, then we don't need to find anything else. I think this is still that type of dualistic view where people still hold this idea that with a brain there's some extra thing that is the qualia. Like, once again, what space that I feel like I am operating in right now, this space of consciousness that I'm experiencing, my understanding is that is literally the activity in my brain creating this type of view. Brain is finite, physical system, surely perfect knowledge is possible. No, I mean, once again, that's not how we think about knowledge, or that's not how I think about knowledge. I say we because I'm drawing on the document, but knowledge is subjective in a fundamental sense, right? I could keep learning more things about this pen forever, and that just goes to show how dynamic my own understanding is, my own condition, my own human condition as well. I would start forgetting things about this pen before I would even get to a point where you could even remotely say that I've learned everything about this pen. Now, I know that sounds like I'm being facetious. I'm trying to point out, like, the philosophical nature of understanding and knowledge. Also, if I think I know everything about a pen, but then I start learning about other concepts that might be related to this pen that might have implication about this pen, then that affects the trajectory of my understanding of this pen as well. Reacted with the penguin in Discord, but seems all the chats are still locked. Are there multiple places you have to react? Do you have to react with... I will come to the rescue here. All right, so what's the deal here? We've got this welcome and rules, and please react. and gain access to the rest of the server. It didn't do anything? For sure? Oh, don't accuse me of dualism now. Yeah, I just think that if we're going to accept... So... Maybe this is a have your cake and eat it too thing. If we're not accepting dualism, then we are operating all in one space. Let's just say it's the space of consciousness. Now, we could talk about these ideas that we have about something as conceptual. That's what I've been doing. And we would understand that the ideas about the physical world are not the physical world itself. So, you know, no matter how many ideas you have about the brain, I would say that isn't necessarily encapsulating all that a brain is. Now, perhaps you write it down and you start getting a knowledge base. You now have an epistemology of the brain, and you're trying to write down all the facts about the brain. I would argue that you're just writing down, you know, really at the end of the day, you're just writing down symbols, and those symbols are triggering thoughts when you look at them, and you know, you're just now having conceptual thoughts about the brain. All this is happening in that monistic view of consciousness. In the consciousness video, I say that, or I point out that really all you are looking for is how do you get from that point you're in to the point where you feel as though you do actually understand enough about the brain to not feel like there's an extra thing. Oh, you could start threads? That's actually great. Thank you for... That's so funny. All right, so I reacted and verified. Didn't seem to work. Now when I try to react again, the penguin emoji disappears immediately. Okay, so that got rid of that one. Did something happen? This should be creating a thread to see if it locks me in. What would this be? This would be Carlbot. Carlbot dashboard. I don't think I'm doing an effective job at explaining this consciousness stuff today. I'm sorry, guys. But I do think that between the past 5 months, I've effectively made the argument, but I could be wrong about that. I need to watch more people maybe make that argument. Maybe that would help me out. Is then all of science subjective? Yes, yes. But the point is, we follow a heuristic that allows us to act as though it is objective. That's the whole point of the scientific method. It's because we're dealing with all these subjective things. What tells us when we're allowed to call something objective? And that's when we use science to point out that, okay, this thing can be reproduced. We can use this thing to predict. Now we can say that is objective. And now it's not that we know for sure it's objective, right? A lot of times you just need to get it over or under a value for something to be statistically significant. But it's a rule. Like once you get past this rule, you're allowed to say it's a thing. You're allowed to say it's true. We don't need to get okay. Sure, but materialism and idealism are non-dualistic. Yes, but if you're a materialist and then you start talking about, I guess you start talking about consciousness as a separate space, then that would start being dualistic. And if you're an idealist and then you start talking about facts about the world as if they're actual things about the world, then now you're dealing with dualism as well, I think. So, you know, in each of those cases, you can't have your cake and you eat it too. This is why I don't think that we're allowed to call ourselves a physicalist or an idealist, because we have to point out that while we are, in terms of ontology, we are closer to the idealist side, we are still acknowledging that we can have a sufficiently robust understanding, conceptual understanding about the physical world. This is some theoretical thing that we're allowed to say exists because of how our science has pointed out how predictable this thing is. And yeah. Where did that weird? Sorry, just pointing that out. Yep. I could create a thread, but that's it. That's so funny. First of all, there shouldn't be able to be a thread. And then what do I need to do here? Moderation roles, auto reaction roles. Welcome and rules, verify, member. Oh, did I mess something up with like? We got penguin, we got member. And let me see. It does say you're a member. You should actually be able to speak in anything. So I think you're chilling. Are you actually just still locked out? It might show the locks, but I think you're able to go in there. I think you do a good job of explaining your understanding, but it's no easy concepts to grasp. Hey, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Just sounds like doublethink. Isn't it problematic to identify as materialist or idealist, etc., as it ties your identity to a way of understanding the world, making you less flexible and open to new ways of understanding the world? Okay, there might be two ways to go here. I'm gonna go the way that I don't think you're asking first. I think it's problematic to identify as either materialist or idealist because those labels are pretty ambiguous. Different people are going to think different things about those. So even if you think like, like what I was doing, that fundamentally I'm idealist because I believe in the fact that all meaning that we experience is actually just a product of consciousness, even if it's coming from brain activity. Or I could say, I'm really a physicalist because I do think at the end of the day, this underlying activity is creating this conscious experience that I'm having, which is where all the meaning that I experience comes from. I don't want to pick one of those labels because then different people are going to think like, oh, but doesn't that mean that you believe this? And then now I'm not communicating effectively enough. But to answer the way that I think you're actually asking, I wish I knew what this concept or topic or concept was called. I know there's a word in Buddhism about this where it has to do with ego in some sense, where when you make if you identify or commit to something in the world, like you let it go, you say it out loud or you write it down, that actually has it's like this awareness that it has an effect on the trajectory of your experience and understanding, such that it might actually hinder you. So you don't want to say like this thing out loud, and you might not want to commit to it. In this case, I don't mind committing to a way of thinking about consciousness because we have so much information that's guiding the way that I think about this. So I if there was a label that perfectly encapsulated what I believe right now, then I think I would take it, because I don't think there's anything that could come out and like there's nothing that could come out except for in the scientific field that would affect the way I think about consciousness right now. They would have to discover something pretty crazy. It would transform the field of neuroscience, and granted, if that happens, then yeah, I'm switching, I'm jumping. It doesn't seem likely given the trajectory of science in the past 5 years. It seems like we're all pointing towards this direction. And I shouldn't say all, because there's still a lot of people out there that are talking about consciousness in different ways. So I'm not going to, but they might not, I don't know if they're how far into neuroscience they are, or the more contemporary views of neuroscience. Okay. I can type, but there's locks on them. I bet. Okay, I see. So I do appreciate that you figured out that we shouldn't be able to have that. So I'm gonna go to permissions here. This is everyone. How does this work? Why can people make? What was it? It was a thread. Create a public thread. And what is the middle here? This falls back to Do I have to hit this? I feel like it shouldn't. I don't know. I'll just keep it that way. Maybe I'll make sure that this is that. Send messages in threads. Create private threads. All right. That's why I don't call myself Buddhist, because people just assume things. Hell yeah. More power to you. That's great. All right, Stan, consider the following. There are two men. In front of them in a pond is a duck. The first man says, "Oh, look, a duck," and points to it. He describes the duck in a general manner. The second man turns and says, "No, it's a pigeon. Can't you see?" He goes on to make arguments for why ducks and pigeons are the same, because they are both birds and share some qualities. No matter what the first man says in terms of logic, the second man disagrees. What's going on with the second man? Well, it could be so let's think about this as this information as rules, right? You know, it's not that there's some objective thing that is saying what a duck and a pigeon is. There's a culture that talks about what a duck and a pigeon is. Now, granted, that culture arrived at those different identifications from empirical observations. So there is, you could say that in this culture, there's like a deep fundamental empirical logic behind which one's a duck and which one's a pigeon. However, this second man might be ignorant of those rules, might not understand that there are actually rules that distinguish between these two things. Perhaps he wasn't taught them. Perhaps where he was, it wasn't a thing. Like, no one cared. People just call, it's like when people call soda pop. You know, it's analogous in that regard. So that's one thing that could be going on. So yeah, when you say no matter what the first man says in terms of logic, it's like, what is he explaining? What is he explaining here? No, it's not a pigeon because pigeons don't have this, right? He has to point out the relation between pigeons and ducks such that pigeon can operate in its own category. The second man might not be aware of those relations. And so, yeah, now this is a simple situation. Now let's just say that it actually really, so let's just say that both kind of knew the rules about what a pigeon and a duck is. But what if there's a lot of implications? If this is a pigeon or a duck, it has implications on something that's more important for these men. Then you start getting in situations where, you know, two people might be looking at the same thing and might completely construe it in different ways because there are different pressures at play. Okay, I don't want. I'm obviously alluding to political stuff, but let's not go there. All right, I know he said even if you have the right view, don't be attached to it. Right. Yep. I guess there's a weird dichotomy here where I have to be attached to it in the sense that I'm trying to make clear that position. Like, I'm trying to point out the logic behind that position, and I'm trying to teach it in some way. And at the same time, deep down, really, I have to be open to the idea of this isn't the way that the world is, right? There's still this there's this possibility that what I believe is wrong, and that is always there. Granted, I have to consider what my role is when we're talking about different things. And right now, I'm trying to push this view that I'm pretty confident about. But perhaps I push it too hard. Of course, maybe there's no right view or whatever, but the eightfold path includes right view. Right, I don't think that there's a right view in some absolute way. I think that this is an important topic where there is a most appropriate view given the rules of the knowledge that we currently have. And yeah, perhaps I just feel more adamant about this because I've been steeped in learning about this stuff for the past year and a half. I think it's only the ability to create a thread in the welcome room, though. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, no, enjoy the space. It's still somewhat of a ghost town, but we'll slowly build it up. I think they are cutting the cake differently, using words differently. Let us say beforehand, the second man did believe that the bird in front of him was a duck. Oh, I don't know what this reaction was to. The second man did believe that the bird... So you're saying he's not lying, right? He did believe it was a duck. And the second man turns and says... Oh, okay, no, the second man turns and says, no, it's a pigeon, can't you see? Well, then I think he's lying for some reason. We just don't know what the reason is. That's what I would... Now, when I say lying, I think what really needs to... what we really have to do on this channel is point out that lying is not the same thing as saying something that you believe is not true. We have to really try to figure out how to describe lying in the way that's closest to home, where it seems like lying would be something where you have some sense that what you're saying is not right according to your own standards, right? It doesn't matter what's right according to other people. According to your own standards, you're saying something that you think is wrong. And you're doing it because you think that perhaps the act of you doing it is right in some more valuable sense or more important reason. So I would want to know what that more important reason is for the second man. But I think he's lying because he knows that that's a duck. Now, are you from the UK? Who knows? Dun dun dun. I think that's the most I could do with the duck situation for now. Okay, let's see.
A house when it enters the body. But that said, the question is not whether, as material beings, we require this apparatus to function properly in the use of consciousness. It's whether consciousness can emerge from that physical state, either phylogenetically or neurologically, whether the consciousness is. And there you encounter all sorts of problems. And problems that more and more tend to be acknowledged now, both by philosophers of mind, but also some very canny scientists who are interested not just in the question of cognitive correlation, but what consciousness might be. Christoph Koch, the famous neuroscientist, is a good example of someone who's moved from, I wouldn't say naive, but a very optimistic hope that one could derive a picture of first-person consciousness from the third-person narrative of neurological events, and has come to embrace a different picture because he felt that the project simply wasn't going to yield the results that he had hoped for.
So Christoph and Giulio Tononi with integrated information theory on the one hand, and then the, shall we call them the panpsychic group, which seems to be expanding their...
well, actually, those two are one and the same.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, well,
in some sense we're all one and the same. But I think they're quite different.
Well, you see, I'm going to disagree with you, no, because actually Tononi and Koch are not, by their own account, providing an account of where consciousness comes from. They're providing an account of its intensity, its cumulative presence in ever more complex systems.
Sure.
But they assume that the consciousness is already a property of physical states. I mean, Koch has become more and more like a panpsychist in describing the presence of consciousness as a brute element of nature, which then, in ever more integrated systems, becomes ever more capable of information states.
Yeah, I think that's true, but I think...
Yeah, I do have to say, like, in full transparency, I do believe that paper that we did read last week was an effective critique of integrated information theory. I think that we do need to be careful with integrated information theory. I would like to... What's the word? So yeah, like going back in time, you could say that perhaps I was pre-biased because I used it in the video, but I do want to make clear that before I made that video and I was just looking into different views of consciousness, I actually wanted to use integrated information theory because I thought that it was pretty cool. Like, I thought it was effective. But then once I looked into it more so, I realized that it wasn't as robust as some of these other views that we were looking at. And then I got to the point where I was thinking, not only is it not as robust, but it's really actually counter to the way that we have been learning about consciousness this entire time, in the sense that it's starting with those fundamental axioms. So if I could, I don't know, be as transparent as possible. It is possible that I'm pre-biased against IIT at this point. However, I wasn't always biased against IIT, so that's how I stumbled on that position, and I was not aware that paper that Peter was posted in the Discord was about integrated information theory and about providing a more sophisticated yet somewhat similar argument that I made just in my consciousness video, which, the one I made, it was, it's a little careless in the sense that I didn't really know too much about the broader field before I made that argument, but I kind of just went off of my gut feeling. And it does feel good to have that type of intuition recognized by the broader, or a broader, neuroscientific community. But yeah, I still think like the underlying reasons hold, and I would need to know more. I would need to just hear a more sophisticated argument, one that dispels the concerns that were mentioned in that article, and the ones that dispel, and one that more importantly for me, one dispels the concern about starting with axioms that are simply intuitive. That was the whole point. Okay. A lot of things are very simple, and STEM makes them even simpler. I hope that's the case, because sometimes when I'm watching these past streams and I'm trying to edit clips from them, there are some times where I don't effectively explain things in the ways that I think I could now, or wish I did. Context, just remembered the meaning of helmet when used as slang in parts of UK. Do you think it still takes consciousness as a brute fact? Oh, I'm sorry. Do you think what still takes consciousness as a brute fact? IIT. Do I still think IIT takes consciousness as a brute fact? That was just David's critique. Oh. I hope I didn't. I think I did actually. I think I did actually delete that conversation. What were the updates in IIT 4.0? Does it still take consciousness as a fundamental axiom in a Cartesian sense? I remember there might have been some nuance on that take. Oh, can rewind the video 10 seconds.
This comes from. They're providing account of its intensity, its cumulative presence in ever more complex systems.
Sure.
But they assume that the consciousness is already a property of physical states. Koch
Right.
has become more and more like a panpsychist in describing.
Right. I'm thinking of they arrive at that conclusion, but they start with an axiom of human consciousness. Right. So they start with the axiom, that the Cartesian axiom of the thing that I know to be certain is that I'm conscious. That's what I was pointing out. Now, granted, because of that, they can get to the idea of integrated information, and because of integrated information, oh, that's wild. It makes sense to me. Well, no. So the panpsychism is the conclusion. It's I'm probably jumping steps, but it's like you start with that axiom, you get to the integrated information. Because of the integrated information and what that entails, that it's a capacity of information to be integrated. Then you can get to the idea that a human brain that isn't even being activated right now is still conscious in the sense that they're talking about it. And now, granted, I reject this, but it starts getting into a panpsychist view where you can consider how like different other objects might have integrated information at some level. Like there's a phi of greater than whatever 0 or whatever is a significant magnitude of phi. Back to the empty cup capable of holding water, has water in it still. Absolutely, yep. It's a tentpole topic for us to talk about consciousness over and over again. But we will make a point to not. Well, as I said, we should have not a countdown, a cool down timer on consciousness discussions. So capacity equals presence. That's essentially, I think, the one of the conclusions they make. All right, represents a significant formalization and mathematical refinement of the theory compared to its predecessors. Mathematical refinements. This is probably not important for us. Introduction of relations. Causal relations to the formalism. It doesn't just look at individual distinctions, formerly called concepts, but at how these distinctions overlap and bind together. Causal marginalization. Terminology, terminological shifts. Okay, we're now looking at cause and effect. And we're looking at some range of T0 to T1, if I recall. The Cartesian axiomatic foundation. Yes, IIT 4.0 still takes consciousness as a fundamental axiom. In fact, it has formalized this even further by introducing the Zeroth axiom. Phenomenal existence is immediate and irrefutable. So right off the bat, I think this is deeply inappropriate. And so, I mean, that was all that I needed, right? I didn't. This was before I read that paper. This was enough for me. IIT is explicitly Cartesian in its epistemology, though not in its ontology. It is not dualist. Like Descartes' cogito. I'm not sure. IIT begins with the one fact that cannot be doubted, the existence of experience here and now, while most neuroscience starts with the brain. So yeah, essentially what I'm trying to point out is we cannot discount how sophisticated it is that we have this thought about consciousness. Like that we have this idea that we are conscious right now. That is really sophisticated in the trajectory of consciousness. You know, we didn't have a clear view of that. I don't know how many years ago we can go here, but it wasn't long ago before we didn't have that type of sophisticated view about our own experience. And then you would ask, like, for those early humans that did not understand themselves to be conscious, what is consciousness? You know? And that this is the idea. It's like once you get to a pig, what is consciousness? You know, just because they can't think about their own consciousness, are they still conscious? And then we could get down to the ant because we have enough information to be able to consider that an ant might have some level of consciousness, but the ant can't think about its own consciousness. Therefore, what do we do? So we can't just say that self-consciousness is this thing that makes consciousness true for the being. That's quite the claim. Can't wait to buy $1 billion yacht with an empty wallet. Yep. While most neuroscientists start with the brain while most neuroscience starts with the brain and tries to find consciousness, IIT starts with the axiom of experience and asks what physical properties a system must have to account for those axioms. And it's not just the physical processes. This is the whole point of going at it the other direction. it almost, in terms of our understanding of consciousness right now, it's important that we have this idea of physical matter and determinism and whatnot, but it really matters that we have this view of evolution that can explain why consciousness would come about in the first place. That's what's really necessary for our understanding of consciousness, right? Like, we understand enough about why we would feel pain when not even experiencing pain physically, right? So like, when I see a social encounter and I feel pain, I physically feel pain. We could see the parts of my brain that usually activate when I experience pain physically. I'm experiencing that when I see someone else doing something. How do you make sense of that outside of this view of evolution? That this was an effective means for homeostasis in the individual level and the societal level. Like, we can make so much intuitive sense about how our brain operates, why we get addicted to things, why we want to eat candy all day. I think cogito ergo sum is totally unscientific, but that it is just outside the scope of science. I actually don't like the way Descartes words it, but you know what I mean. Right. Yeah, I mean, it's philosophy. That's the thing. When dealing with science here, we can't start with some philosophical axiom that's semantically ambiguous and, semantically contingent in a fundamental sense. Now, granted, you could say that all discussion of science is similar, but once again, at least science you can justify with reasons that involve the scientific method. Yeah, it's difficult to make clear all the rules that allow us to do one versus the other. So that's where I think it is actually like an awkward position to start trying to argue in that way. But that's that's really all we have, or all that I'm allowed to do. Okay, IIT 4.0 makes a sharper distinction between the two phenomenal axioms, properties of existence that are self-evident. These require the requirements for a physical substrate to satisfy those axioms. Unlike the axioms, the postulates are considered an inference to a good explanation and are therefore subject to falsification in scientific testing. Okay. We can continue with, but perhaps with caution.
Describing the presence of consciousness as a brute element of nature, which then, in ever more integrated systems, becomes ever more capable of information states.
Yeah, I think that's true, but I think there is a difference between the panpsychists, who I would think Dave Chalmers or Galen Strawson would really invest every aspect of reality with some consciousness, whereas the information integrated folks would have consciousness be kind of an additional aspect of reality in some n-dimensional space or some non-Hilbert, some kind of space that has their own characteristics to it. So it's a reflect. The point being that both are very extreme positions, and John Searle would be amazed that this could happen.
And neither of them is the most extreme on offer, because they're also the eliminativists, who with varying degrees of adventurousness will deny the existence of consciousness at all.
Right.
Paul and Patricia Churchland, who believe that all talk of conscious states, including talk of beliefs, will, even anything that we would associate with personal identity or personal motive, can be reduced to fundamental biochemical descriptions, and then even perhaps to atomic.
You see, I would think that is, I don't agree with that, but I think that's a coherent position.
I think you could. If we had the information, we could do it. We could explain all of these things down to the smallest level of physical processes. Granted, how do you, I would think that we would want to do that in like code or something, but it's almost impossible to do that given how once again how analog these systems are. So the types of, I don't think humans could communicate that, but I think it's possible. I think if you could, you probably can represent all this stuff. I mean, obviously that's the point. You can actually represent sophisticated physical systems with wave functions They call this the superposition of a set of electrons. And you could describe that. And the issue is, though, that humans, we wouldn't be able to see that type of equation and then make sense of what, in our own intuitive understanding, that means. But if we had some machine, it could do that and translate what that would be to facts about that, what that person's thinking or what that person might say. So I feel like I'm gonna end up finding that this topic's just not gonna be fun, given that it's so complex. But it's also so cool. I don't want to get too down in the dumps here, because I think consciousness I think this topic of consciousness is actually quite interesting and like beautiful in some way. Okay, can we rewind a little in the convo? So capacity equals presence. What level of reduction of that capacity will it take to render presence moot? Must be a way to substantiate that claim, right? Yeah, I don't want to give too much effort to IIT. You might be able to ask Gemini or ChatGPT like why IIT thinks that capacity equals presence or equals consciousness in some sense. Yeah. Now, they might have actually gone away from the capacity route, but I don't remember. But they're certainly looking at a temporal range that I would argue is inappropriate.
Where some of the other positions that try to create a physicalist interpretation of consciousness, I find more problematic. What about so-called non-reductive physicalism, which still tries to be materialistic, physical in terms of explanations without anything non-physical, but claims it's non-reductive to kind of deal with the issue of consciousness?
Well, you've got me, to be honest, because those who talk about non-physicalist reductionism have never been able, in my mind, to make a sufficiently coherent case for the aptness of that designation. So I would, to me, if it's not reductionist, it's not physicalist. Either one is claiming that consciousness is the physical result of physical processes, or one is claiming something that can't be fit into that physicalist picture. And if it's non-reductionist, then it becomes a story of magic. The notion that properties can emerge that have no continuity with at least the calculable properties of its.
Yeah, this is kind of the issue here. Like, what do we mean by properties emerging? Now, you could think about properties emerging in terms of the way that we intuitively feel our own consciousness. And we're in the space of qualia now. And, it seems like, these properties that we're experiencing are just not in the same language as the properties we're talking about physically. I would say, like, the properties that are emerging, we can only describe in a sense of information mapping and more sophisticated allostasis and homeostasis and autopoiesis. Like, that's really the only way that we could do it. Like, those are the properties of what just arose. Now, granted, we can say that what arose is a system that's now going to have these behavioral outputs, such as me talking or someone talking. And when I say someone talking, I mean someone moving their muscles in a certain way that sound waves come out of their mouth. And those are all still physical properties. We're still in the physical property way point of view. And if that it doesn't make anyone happy because a robot could do that, then I could say that this is physical properties could arise such that when this organism sees another organism in the same way, I was just talking about the pain thing. They see this other social creature doing something, then they will feel, and when I say feel, I mean things are going to trigger in their body and their brains such that behaviorally that's going to lead to them having this experience of pain. And we can look at the correlates of those experiences. So really what I'm saying is they're going to have that type of activation predictively. Okay. one could argue that an infant does not possess consciousness and behaving on reflex. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, the way that we would go about answering how infant experiences consciousness would be how much of the parts of the brain that we know are most importantly related to consciousness are there. But once again, if we're talking about something like a baby or a pig or an ant, we have to keep in mind that the type of consciousness being experienced is not the type of consciousness that we intuit, not the type of consciousness that we know we have, right? So, yeah, if we're gonna say that a baby experiences consciousness, it would not be something we could intuit. It would be a very different experience, and intuitively so, because we know so much of the baby's brain has not been developed yet. They're literally experiencing the world in different ways. We could point to so from this Sapolsky book, we can point to adolescence and show how much raw emotion people in their teens are experiencing. The highs are higher than adults, and the lows are lower than adults. So they are literally experiencing the world in a significantly different way. And yet they're still similarly enough conscious that we would think that they are the same type of consciousness that we adults have. And when I say we adults, I don't know if any teens are watching, so I'm sorry. But the brain is literally still developing and not even fully formed. Yeah, and once again, an important thing to keep in mind when we're talking about brains developing is that it's not just things growing. We see that babies start with a significant amount of neurons and synapses, and over time those are pruned to sculpt something akin to the more developed brain. So it's not just growing, it's literally conditioning. And that's why culture's so effective. Oh, the coolest thing that I just read yesterday was that Sapolsky makes the case that we can see that the frontal cortex takes the longest. So the newest evolutionary development takes the longest to develop. And he points out that the parts of our brain that are least, connected to our genetics develop latest. And I don't know if I said that well enough, but pointing out that the part of our brain that deals with sophisticated social inhibition and learning and understanding and whatnot, and sophisticated knowledge acquisition, like these are the latest parts of our brain to finish. Whereas right off the bat, we're getting like base stuff, like base sensory regions and networks. Like those are developing early, and then the very sophisticated knowledge parts of the brain are developing later. And he, I think, hypothesizes that that's due to how effective we are at how effective humans, how would I say this? How significant culture plays in the development of humans. The frontal cortex allows us to have these sophisticated cultures that transform the way that we experience the world. It's not that we just learn things and that's the only thing that we have over previous species. We literally experience the world in significantly different ways.
Ingredients is not an explanation of anything. You simply say, well, we put enough of these things together and then something happened, and then we have conscious minds. It's not a it's not physicalist. It just refuses to acknowledge the fact. However, I disagree with what you just said. I don't see eliminativism as a coherent proposition. I just see it as the nuclear option if you've given up on
Or maybe that's the same thing.
Well, there's kind of coherence in absolute destruction, but I mean, look at what conclusions you're led to there. It means that there's no such thing as real intentionality, that there are no real things as interior qualitative states of consciousness. You have someone like Alex Rosenberg, for instance, is an eliminativist at the end of the day, is a philosopher who's sort of...
The question would be, what is an intentional state? Are we talking about what becomes conscious to us as our own intentions, or are we talking about some pattern of dopamine release that drives us towards some behavior, you know? And I think he's referring to the first one, giving us some sort of free will. But yeah, the thing that I try to point out on this channel is that our understanding of even our intentional states, let's just say our understanding of our intentions and our actions and whatnot, these things are becoming conscious to us. And our consciousness is an amalgamation of top-down and bottom-up signals. So what becomes conscious to us is kind of a manifestation of a lot of different processes in our brain. So we can't think of them as like some purely top-down, we decided experience. That said, we find ourselves in this position where we're experiencing the world in this certain way, and it feels like we have this type of understanding, and it feels like we can do things. It feels like we have freedom. So as far as our conscious processes are concerned, our conscious selves in that regard, obviously, like a lot of religions and spiritual teachings point out that the self is an illusion, and that's kind of what we're pushing at. But for the case of our own practical engagement with the world, we can just play with this illusion. We feel as though we have a self. We feel as though we can do these things. So let's leverage that feeling, because when we think about doing something, like when we think of like, I want to go and do this thing, that's actually going to affect our thoughts in such a way that it affects like downstream processes in our brain and body, and it's actually going to affect whether we get up and do the thing. It's going to affect how we feel about doing the thing. That's what part 2 is going to be about. How can we think about our situation such that our motivation is actually leveraged when going to actually do it. And we can do a lot of stuff with that. What are the measurable aspects of IIT? Well, I think that's another complication they have. We've pointed to PCI, like the Perturbational Complexity Index, as a way that you can think about IIT, but I think that paper we just read gave an argument for why PCI is actually not an effective look at IIT. One of the reasons being is it looks at patterns of activity over time. So IIT kind of, as I pointed out, cares about integration at a much smaller time frame than I think is necessary for us to see the type of integration that we would want out of PCI. But I don't know enough in this space, so these would be all good questions for like Gemini. These are the types of questions I would ask. I think I have asked those questions, and I've forgotten the answer, because usually, once I get the conclusion of the discussion, and this is after I push back, if there's anything that I don't understand, then I can just register the conclusion without having to remember everything that led to it. I could bring up the whole what's that guy's name? David in Would I Lie to You? David Mitchell. His whole, if I knew how I knew everything I knew, I'd only be able to know half as much. I still think it's so genius. Okay, just curious if they can even make a model with some form or level of measurement. Well, they're in the realm of computational neuroscience, so they can I don't know what they do with IIT. They might be able to leverage IIT computational models for some predictive aspect. I don't know. That paper made it seem like they aren't doing that. So I'm not sure what they're doing. I'm not sure why. Yeah, why people are taking it really seriously. But what you're asking is the right thing to ask, I think. And that the whole point of that article that they were saying is, hey, like IIT does not live up to these standards of science, therefore, and it also purports to show something scientific. Therefore, they were labeling it. They were tentatively labeling it as pseudoscience.
An evangelical atheist too, and he understands that this involves saying that there may be no such thing as intrinsic intentionality. That would mean that even the words he's putting on the page, he's acknowledging, don't mean anything. But he says there's an illusion of intrinsic.
Well, okay, we have to be careful about just. Even if we didn't have free will in the way that people want to have free will, that doesn't mean that the words that we put on paper don't mean anything. And that has to lead us to a discussion of what meaning means. And this is why I like to talk about meaning as something that's experienced and felt. So the stuff we put on paper will affect the trajectory of our experience and including our conscious experience. I should say our experience as being the conscious part of this, but it's going to affect the trajectory of what happens in our body and brain in reaction to the stimuli of those words on the paper, and part of that reaction is going to be our conscious experience. I think he has some broad definitions of intentionality. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think the way he's talking about it makes me think that it's some level of free will, some freedom that arises from consciousness.
Intentionality. But an illusion of intrinsic intentionality would be intrinsically intentional, because what you imagine you're reading there is actually an intentional experience. I mean, it doesn't even rise to the level of a vicious circle.
Yeah, so this makes it very difficult for him to have a clear definition of intentionality. Now, we could call this, or we could I don't know. We'd have to abstract some amount of. Yeah, the issue is that I'm trying to map what he's talking about to what we know about the brain. And I think he's trying to leave some aspect of this equation unaccounted for so that we can take in some external contributor to consciousness, which I don't want to even allow him, because I think we can make sense of whatever type of intentionality he's talking about. We can make sense of. The question is, what type of, what abstraction are we talking about? Are we talking about our conscious experience? Are we talking about the dopamine and affective networks that lead to that conscious experience? I'm sure it's not his own concept, some reference. IIT, such as I grasp it, is starting to seem like philosophy with some pictures for show and tell. And that's all it is. Yeah, we haven't really gone that deep into IIT. I don't think we need to. What else can be? I'm not sure. There's probably answers to these questions, though. I doubt that it would have nothing for us, right? I don't want to be too dismissive of it. Like, perhaps it does give us something that's useful. It's just not what we're looking for in a theory of consciousness. But perhaps it can give us something that is beneficial for enriching some of these other theories of consciousness that I think are so much more grounded.
Cool. So, I would disagree with that. I think eliminativism is taking the emergentist narrative to such an extreme that it almost parodies.
Why I think it's coherent is that it recognizes that if it allows you to have real consciousness, it's not going to be able to explain it, and therefore it has to eliminate it.
Right.
So it recognizes that. A lot of people don't recognize that.
Right. Well, that's why I say I like the extreme.
So I would love to have a conversation with this guy, but I could not have a conversation with this guy because I don't think we would be able to get past the baseline suppositions of the discussion. That's not to say I wouldn't want to have I'll have a conversation with either of these guys about something, but about consciousness, I don't think we would be able to make too much room. That being said, perhaps it would be useful to iron out. It would actually be useful probably for me to just explain my argument. And so when I say, I should amend what I just said. In terms of me, no, let me amend this again. Yeah, let me take it back. I think it would still be useful, even if I knew that this guy would disagree with me and I would probably disagree with him on that. I think that I would end up with a view of my own position that is better and more sophisticated than the current view of my own position, given the types of counter arguments he provides. So I think it would be beneficial for me to have that conversation. So, you know what? This is a lesson where I need to be open to even strengthening my own positions from people that disagree. Yeah. Am I going to start a podcast? I think I will. I don't know at what point in this whole trajectory that I'm imagining I'm going to start this podcast. I'm not sure. The issue is that right now I don't want to... So I certainly don't want to like interview people. And usually people do podcasts where they interview people. I just want to ask people about what we should be doing regarding this document. So right now I'm in the position of like, I think it would actually be more useful for us to be on other people's podcasts for a good while. And then once we get really cooking, we can create our own podcast for the sake of something, but I'm not sure what that would be. I don't know, but I really should at some point start networking around. I don't think you need to be try hard with questions. Just have a cool broad discussion. Yeah, I think it would be a unique type of podcast, because I keep watching these podcasts and they always start the same way and they always go into the same thing. Like, I would probably try to make the conversation more interesting than I think other people have had I would try to bring the conversation to things, to the front lines in some sense. I would say like, okay, let's skip past all these things. Like, let's just get to the stuff. And yeah, I so many of these conversations and podcasts, I feel like just never get to the stuff. But maybe that's because I disagree about what the stuff is.
Solutions, because they openly acknowledge, if nothing else, the difficulty of accounting for consciousness in physical terms. Eliminativism says, I have a model of reality, and here's a phenomenon, a rather conspicuous phenomenon, that is conscious existence, which we all share, which doesn't fit the model. Reason, scientific rigor, philosophical rigor would usually say, well, if you have a phenomenon that doesn't fit the model, then you eliminate the model. However, if the model is the picture of reality to which you've committed yourself come hell or high water, then you've got to eliminate the phenomenon. And in this case, it's a hell of a task, because this phenomenon is phenomenality as such. It's the entirety of all experience and all of its discernible properties.
I think we got to call it. We got to jump ship. All right, here we go. The man himself, the man, the myth, the legend, talking about breaking the thought trap of anger. I just get confident, then email some YouTubers and work your way up the ladder. Yeah, I was so inspired by this guy. Where is it this guy? Yeah, I'm so inspired by this guy. Look at this channel. This guy is getting like less than 1,000 views every single video, and he's interviewing these huge names. And he's probably getting there just by asking them. like he's probably just finding people and then talking to them, and they're interested. But this is unbelievable to me. So that's all I think I would have to do. Granted, I don't think I need to talk to a lot, like, I know this sounds terrible, but I feel like I don't need to talk to a lot of people right now for the sake of what I'm doing in the document. I think that it would lend itself better if I finished the document up and then I started talking to people, because I would be better at explaining the stuff I say in the document. I would actually be able to show something for myself, and then I could start pushing on the edges of where we're at in the document. That would be, I think, the effective way to go about this. So I'm inspired, and I like that this avenue is open. But I don't think we need to be having like conversations with random doctors and philosophers and neuroscientists right now. Does it work on a Zoom connection though, or would you invest a little in a podcast setup where they're coming here? Well, no one's coming here. I really don't have the the infrastructure for that, nor the clout. So I would work on a Zoom connection. I would just do it over Zoom or Discord. I would just get in that game, or I would go places if anyone wants me to go somewhere. I certainly would do that. I mean, I like the Jack's interviews, but I'm a little concerned that he hasn't gotten larger, and I don't think that I would have that struggle. I think we could probably, if we were getting on other people's podcasts, maybe that's the difference. Maybe he's just hosting everyone. But if I think we could probably do a lot with a podcast with some other YouTuber. Then email some YouTubers and work your way up the ladder. Okay. How dope does this look? I want to read it. Oh, let's go. What are we at? 8:47. We're almost at 2 hours. So, okay. Waking, dreaming, being, and consciousness in neuroscience. Oh, this is dope, right? Is this not in my necessary research yet? No. I do want to read this. Big fan of, obviously, Evan Thompson. And when did this come out? 2014. A renowned philosopher of mind, also known for his groundbreaking work on Buddhism and cognitive science, Evan Thompson combines the latest neuroscience research on sleep, dreaming, and meditation with Indian and Western philosophy of mind, casting new light on the self and its relation to the brain. Yeah, this looks awesome. I think I determined that this is probably not necessary for me to read for the document right now, but I would want to read this eventually. So it might be somewhere. I'll find it again. Probably because at some point I'll be curious what Evan Thompson's doing, because I was stoked to read his paper on neurophenomenology. What was that in? There was one after this, so when would that be? An introduction? 2010? I think I read this. Oh, or was it this? It could have been this one. Brain dynamics from a neurophenomenological. No, it was probably the first one. Probably this guy. Cool stuff, though. March. Do you have a read list for March? Oh, for March. I don't know if that would be... Oh, actually, yeah, I guess... I see what you're saying. Do I have a read list for March? Unfortunately, I might still be reading Sapolsky in March. So I don't think I have a read list for March. Except for... Meditation for Music Makers, which I think we'll do on stream. We need to look at... Okay, we did that. Neurophenomenology. Okay, we do have a video on... So I don't think I'm going to do the video on neurophenomenology, but I'll do that on stream. I don't think I'm going to be doing scripted videos. Just takes too much time. We have too much stuff we need to do. Okay, this is a really good interpretation. Tao Te Ching. That's worth giving a listen. Okay. Oh, this is huge. And it's an ebook. Okay, I'm gonna put this in the maybe watch on stream. And we'll have to... For meditation science, Daniel Goleman is the dude. Much love. This one looks dope. So I heard about that one book that like Buddhism in the Brain. What's that one book that's popular? It was kind of huge. I thought maybe perhaps that would be important. Altered Traits. Science reveals how meditation changes your mind, body, and brain. Hell yeah. When did this come out? 2017? Okay. The Bodhisattva's Brain. No, it had like a really Western name, Western title. So popular books about Buddhism for beginners, perhaps. Nah, none of those. None of those. I could just be totally off on this one, but yeah. Oh, we got a viewers. Tao Te Ching is a 2,500-year-old book, but this interpretation and translation into English is the best in my opinion. Very cool. I really don't know anything about the Tao Te Ching, so that would be cool. I like Zhuangzi more than Tao Te Ching. Maybe add meditation to the keyword. Oh, that could have been it, right? Probably about meditation. Nah. I could have sworn this was like a popular book. I actually did. Oh, this. You know what? I think this is it. Why Buddhism is true. But this could be like a very simple book. Like this could be a beginner's book. I'm not sure. All right. How evolution shaped the human brain. The mind is designed to often delude us, he argued, about ourselves and about the world, and is designed to make happiness hard to sustain. But if we know our minds are rigged for anxiety, depression, anger, and greed, what do we do? Right locates the answer in Buddhism, which figured out thousands of years ago what scientists are only discovering now. Buddhism holds that human suffering is a result of not seeing the world clearly and proposes that seeing the world more clearly through meditation will make us better, happier people. And why Buddhism is true, Wright leads readers on a journey through psychology, philosophy, and a great many silent retreats to show how and why meditation can serve as the foundation for a spiritual life in a secular age. At once excitingly ambitious and wittingly accessible, this is the first book to combine evolutionary psychology with cutting-edge neuroscience to defend the radical claims at the heart of Buddhism, at Buddhist philosophy. With bracing honesty and fierce wisdom, it will persuade you not just that Buddhism is true, which is to say a way out of our delusion, but that it can ultimately save us from ourselves as individuals and as a species. 2017 as well. I'm not a fan of Robert Wright. Okay, what is Wright do? The poetry of it is very captivating in the Zhuangzi. I'm hesitant to take the title seriously. I also really like the simplicity and poetry of the Tao Te Ching while holding so much depth and wisdom. I'll check out Zhuangzi. Thank you. Awesome. Hell yeah. Has all these crazy images and metaphors going on. I'm sure the book is fine, but I just saw a Robert interview someone, and he just doesn't seem well practiced. I think the author is painting Buddhism with a broad stroke. There are various variants of it, right? Yeah, I'm sure it's looking at like a abstract generalization, but perhaps not. I don't know. I haven't read it. But yeah, what's the? Could we do something like Buddhism, and then could we go search by? We got most read. Could we search by most highest rated? No. What is this site? We're not allowed to do that? Now what if I did Buddhism just in here? And then... No? What's the point of this rating system if I can't list by rating? Browse. Why would they not allow that? Such an easy thing to implement unless they... Yeah, I'm not sure. Goodreads search sucks. Nice. If he doesn't narrow down which branch of Buddhism he's writing about within the first 2 chapters, I would put it down. Nice. I've listened to the Tao Te Ching hundreds of times in the past decade. That's awesome. Goodreads always buggy for me. Yeah, it's very, very oddly lacking. Okay, what do we got, Sam? Do we have time for this? I don't think we do, but let's just try to run it.
Of compassion ultimately is to recognize that you want other people to thrive. You want to cancel these disparities and bad luck insofar as you can. And more to the point, you want to help build a fair and just society that the wealthier it becomes, the more it makes life, even for its poorest members, better and better, such that the human world becomes unrecognizably good. And there's no question that's possible.
How can we become better versions of ourselves?
Well, one basis for hope is when you look at how much of our suffering is self-caused, you immediately see that we could just stop doing that, right? I mean, so if most of human misery and inequality and conflict and violence is a matter of the stories that people are telling themselves and finding credible, and the fact that those stories are discordant, then you see that virtually all of human suffering and chaos is just tissue thin. I mean, it's a bad dream. It's just, thoughts that people are finding.
So to be more pragmatic about this, though, first of all, when someone knows that they can do this with their own mind, it's not easy in the sense that you can just get yourself to that. It's a practice. You have to now do this practice where you have to build up habits of thinking certain ways, or you build up a practice of no-go, of not letting yourself get into thoughts of negative loops. So there is that level of practice, but then there's before that you have to convince the person that this is possible. So one of the things that he could be advocating for is further distribution of this possibility. So teaching that this is possible, which is something he's doing right now. But for someone like me, the impetus would then be to, I don't know if I'm using that word correctly. The conclusion would be then to really learn how effective these skills are, these tools, and then to spread them, which is what I'm trying to do in part 2.
Finding compelling, and they could cease to find those thoughts.
Okay, teach me how to love Sam. By defining better within the context of value theory. To be selfish is to value and use resources for personal gain. If that is what you value, doing exactly that is better. Right, yeah. I think Sam is always ambiguous as to his value system. Like, I think he just assumes that we're all on the same page, or that the values are objective in some sense. And while I agree with his like moral conclusions in some sense, I don't think that we should act as if this is just clear to everyone, and that this is a very simple system where there are objective morals involved. I think we really do have to we have to be cognizant. We have to acknowledge, like self-consciously, that we're dealing with, at the end of the day, norms that people need to that we need to spread, and that people need to literally be conditioned to believe are true. So how do we do that? What's the best way to do that? And one way is to just set a good example and to teach these. Have always felt something is off about Sam Harris. Could be wrong. I always respect the dude because he's a beast meditator. Yeah, I mean, full disclosure, I'm a big Sam Harris fan. He usually talks very deliberately and very carefully and very calmly. Now, not everything he says is necessarily something I think is gold or something I agree with, but I think the way, like the meta practices that he leverages here when he's trying to reason through something, and when the fact that he can keep his composure even if he's talking with someone that really cannot, or is attacking him, like he's doing all the micro so well that you have to you like his delivery often better than what he spews. No, I think what he spews is actually most often great, right? Like, I think he's like, as far as I'm concerned, like a 90%er in terms of what he spews. And then we can talk about that last 10%, maybe like 5 of it is like something that I'm like, and then 5% of it's like, I don't know. But I think, he is much more reliable. Like, he's one of the most reliable people that I think I've ever seen online, in terms of, if he's about to say something, then I would probably agree with it, or find that it's, I shouldn't say probably agree with it, because a lot of stuff I don't know until he says it, but I would say it's like well reasoned. So I don't want the criteria to just be whether I agree with it or not, but it's more like how good I can feel with those reasons. So I'm like internalizing those own reasons. That's why I say like how that's why I thought of like what I think. But it's really that I'm internalizing these reasons as he's saying them, and then I can feel comfortable having those reasons. But I feel like his reasons are usually well constructed and pretty cogent and pretty rational.
Compelling. Not much has to change. Again, it's not a story of there being a sufficient number of bad people in the world to make life unlivable, right? It's almost never the case. The numbers of truly bad people, true psychopaths, true sadists, it's always tiny, right? It's the tiniest rounding error on what is actually the case, which is you have psychologically normal, compassionate, otherwise good people ruled by bad ideas, and ideas that put them in explicit conflict with other human beings who have different ideas. All of this, the status quo, when you look at it, can be very depressing, but the basis for hope in radical change is right there on the surface, because again, there's almost no problem human ingenuity can't solve, right? In the end, there's just, unless, this is a point that the physicist David Deutsch made recently, which I find compelling. Unless there's some law of physics that rules it out, any change in the universe that is possible in the presence of sufficient knowledge, right? And I would add, you need sufficient cooperation to implement that knowledge, right? But really, the sky is the limit in terms of how good we can make human life, on the basis of our understanding how the world works, and on the basis of a disposition to spread the wealth around, right? And to cancel the truly unconscionable disparities in good and bad luck we see in this world. I mean, just that.
Yeah, this is one of those ones where like I wouldn't fully agree with this case, because I think we've talked about it in the past where we really can't come up with something better than like a capitalist democracy right now, and like that's the best we've got, and we can see how flawed that is, but also how effective that is in the sense of it makes everyone wealthy, creates a ton of wealth disparity, and also introduces all these issues of first of all the possibility of it collapsing into some other type of system, or being able to create people that have like significant amounts of power over other people. Ideally, like we would want a system where we get some sort of mechanism in place to accommodate this type of disparity. But it's very like it's not like a science issue. It's not an issue where we just need to know the knowledge of the world. Granted, you could say that it's like a knowledge issue in the sense that we just need to know the algorithms or the yeah, like the issue is though, so perhaps we could learn the game theory algorithms that allow us to have a system that everyone can, that allows us all to regulate the society in such a way where everyone is well off. But I don't know if everyone's like I don't think we have the intelligence for people to really care about that type of system, and for even people to feel comfortable in it. Like you have to understand why you have to have some level of understanding of why this algorithm is more important than human ideas. And that's something that not everyone can grasp. So I know people advocate for some sort of like AI driven government or system, and like that's just gonna be hard to sell. So we are dealing with this issue that does seem to be not simply like one-to-one with our knowledge about the world. Like there's a lot more ambiguous knowledge that we need, and the question is, how difficult is that knowledge, or does that knowledge even exist? Hopefully that was cogent in any way. AI can be the foundation of a better system, I think, but humans can't handle the power. That's another way of what I just said. Like, you'd have to make it so that the system was somehow decoupled from individual humans' power, such that maybe like you're still dealing with some sort of democratic development of the system itself. And how does that work? Like, this is a highly complex system now. But someone at some point, you have to push off the power. You'd have to literally say, okay, we as humans have to give up this power, but you have to be very confident that you've just created an AI system that would not go rogue in some sense, or that is robust enough that regardless of what people think in the future, that it would still be able to adapt. AI could also destroy humanity. Yep. If the singularity truly happens, it's possible to predict what society will look like. Oh, it's impossible to oh yeah. I mean, it's going to be both awesome and scary at the same time. It's yeah, we've got an interesting 50 years ahead of us. So that's something to be excited for, but also to be very anxious about. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
There are many of us who are born with every opportunity and virtually no impediments to our well-being, and there are those who are in the opposite circumstance, and none of us are responsible for where we have entered this game. No one watching this can claim to have decided not to be born in some war-torn country.
I do agree with that. I think it's coming regardless. And I mean, unless we can somehow, yeah, it's going to be just like the nuke, though. You can't get, like, no one country can just stop, and regulation also brings up that same type of issue. It's like, hey, this other country is going to be leveraging these things. Yeah, we're gonna start seeing some weird stuff. I'm a doomer at the end of the day, even though I'm such an optimistic person. But it's my imagination can just go too far.
To totally irresponsible or absent or soon to be dead parents, right? No one who wasn't orphaned in Syria in a civil war is responsible for that, and no one who was born neurologically healthy is responsible for that. You can't account for the fact that you don't have brain damage, right? I mean, just list your advantages, for as long as you like. Really, none of them were brought into being by you, right? You're a beneficiary of all of these gifts. Insofar as you have them. And if you're intelligent and you're capable of great effort, those things too are mere inheritances.
Like significantly more crazy stuff. But yeah, I agree that the stuff we're seeing is already crazy. I think we get really crazy stuff once we start seeing the robotics catch up, and then we're going to start seeing what massive amounts of robotics and wealth like how that can transform our physical spaces, as well as yeah, I mean, there's just gonna be so much stuff coming down the pipeline. Obviously weapons are gonna get really crazy. We're gonna have to deal with robot rights, we're gonna have to deal with robot companions, we're gonna have to deal with all kinds of stuff. So the thing about humans not really comprehending exponential growth is that it will likely happen fast. Yep. Well, yeah, I guess we need to be... Exponential growth happens fast at the end, right? But that bar could be going for a long time. I think that's what we're kind of seeing with... Well, yeah, the question is, are we even on an exponential growth with regard to AI? I think it's possible, given that companies are using AI for writing code right now. But if there's some fundamental technology level constraint on these AI systems, then we will still see some bit of, like, it'll still be semi-linear, or maybe it's still it's one of these graphs, the logarithmic graphs, that we still just see keep going up. And that's the other thing. In a logarithmic graph, this thing can go for a long time. So we can keep getting growth for a while, but at some point you do get that leveling out. But I don't know enough about the AI models to know when we're going to get what types of growth. I know that's a huge debate. It's all wrapped up in this whole bubble that we're dealing with right now, which is crazy. Absolutely insane. This next year is going to be really wild. Just so much uncertainty about so many different important life-changing things are in the next year. So we'll be dealing with that. We'll be keeping up with it over here, even if I won't be necessarily talking about it as the topic of what we go over on this channel.
They're genetic, they're environmental, there's some combination of the two. But the fact that you weren't murdered in a ditch as a child, right, is something
Internet
you
was a
can't
bubble too.
control.
Yep.
So,
I think
the better part of compassion.
Yeah, I think that the ratio, or the magnitude, the relative magnitude of this bubble is ridiculous compared to the .com and the housing. We are dealing with an insane bubble right now, and I don't know what happens, given the fact that AI could technically pay out in the end, maybe. Like, well, it's hard to see where that lines up right now, given the type of growth we're seeing in these AI products. But who knows? Stuff like Genie comes out, and I'm just like, we are in a new world. This is crazy. And I'm a big proponent of um, I should say, I'm a big proponent of me using these LLMs. I think I know how to extract a lot of value out of LLMs, but I know that that's not always the case with everyone, and it also is showing significant negatives for learning for a lot of people. I think it's not great for young people who are still developing important skills for learning. So tighten the seatbelt and enjoy the ride. Yep. I mean, that is actually, that's kind of along with Sam's saying here. We can enjoy the ride at least, and it's perhaps not the most useful thing or the most pragmatic way to go about life to just be anxious all the time. That said, that doesn't mean we need to be apathetic to what's happening. We just need to be ready. Like, we need to be preparing ourselves, and we need to be doing something we believe to be good, such that every single day we can feel as though we've done something right, and that we are well equipped. Like, that's kind of how I'm feeling right now for this year. Wonder what human society with abundance would look like. Well, we do have abundance right now, I think. It's just that abundance is not being leveraged to bring about some sort of egalitarian society. Yeah, we have an insane amount of wealth just spread across an insane wealth disparity. Post scarcity. Well, yeah, that's the other thing. Like, we really don't need scarcity right now. That's the thing. Now, granted, I should point out that there's a possibility that scarcity of the mindset could just be a product of relative poverty. So that could be a product of disparity that would still be there. Like, maybe everyone is absolutely wealthy enough to pay the bills, and still there's like scarcity mindset for people who are in relative poverty. And I don't know if we get rid of that, if that's the case. But as long as everyone can like pay their bills, and I think if you're saying you're probably saying post scarcity, like everyone can live in a house and everyone's got food and stuff like that, and maybe no one has to work. That would be cool. Yeah, I mean, we have enough money for that, but the tricky thing is then we get into issues about how the system works, and yeah, I think it will be an initial issue of finding meaning. If you don't have to work because machines do that. I kind of reject that view. I think that if everyone had the time, then I think people would coordinate to create mechanisms for meaning that people are motivated to participate in. So whether those are creative or whatnot. Now, granted, we'd have to watch out because, of course, people might get stuck in like video games and all kinds of other things that would give them that feeling, but it would be fleeting, and perhaps they would feel like their life needs to be something else. But I think a lot of people would be able to find, like, I'm not convinced that people are just like straight up need their job in order to feel meaning. I think so too, but in the start, if humans are used to finding their meaning in the way they do currently, why would people need to be motivated if that is the default objectivity of what's best for people? I don't quite understand that question. Oh, obviously people don't think that. Yeah, I think it would be like, I was surprised at when I was in college. I was surprised at how complacent I was or comfortable I was, given that I was doing my homework. Like, I had a significant amount of free time. And as long as I was doing my homework, which is following this story of I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing in college, I'm literally just doing what's necessary right now, yet I'm still wasting, quote unquote. I'm still having fun a ton of the day in this free time. I was still fine, right? Because I was doing what I was supposed to do, and someone else set up what I was supposed to do. This is the great thing about these types of situations where someone else is creating the criteria, and as long as the criteria is not too bad, then you can it's a gold mine of meaning. However, I would look at that amount of free time that I used to not do something productive today, and I would say, oh, okay, I could have done more. But of course, that was my college experience, so I'm not too upset about it. I'm pretty stoked about that college experience. But today, I don't allow that type of free time to go to waste. So, but I'm also a weirdo. I'm doing this stuff for fun over here, well, for necessity and fun, just on the side. So I'm probably not the best example. Why would people need to be okay? What do you spend free time on? Well, I get maybe a few hours of free time here and there. Though I've been keeping myself busy with this stuff. I've spent free time on, usually when I eat food, I'm like watching a podcast or something, or I'm reading Reddit. Maybe that's like 30 to 40 minutes a day. During lunch, and maybe like similarly during dinner. And then after my stream every night from like 9 to 10:30 now, I get free time to like play video games and talk with friends. And then I read, and then I go to bed. So I've actually limited my free time pretty significantly in the past 6 months or so. Thank you. Yeah, I think, I'm at the point where I think I've been able to get myself to be able to not need as much free time as I used to. Like, I remember maybe 4 years ago or 3 years ago thinking like, man, like I really cherish the free time that I use, whether it's like playing video games or whatnot after work, from like 6 to 10. That's like 4 hours a day. And I always had this idea that I could get to a point where I didn't cherish that, but you have to go through this barrier of like you're feeling loss. Like we have loss aversion, and we have loss aversion on time as well. You don't want to lose that time. So I think it took years. One of the things I've realized that's really effective is like, if you want to make a change in your life, like a significant change, perhaps you don't have to make it tomorrow, but it's really effective to plant that idea in your mind and to like keep thinking about it over and over again, like here and there. Like I do want to still get to that point. It wouldn't be right for me to do it right now, or I don't feel comfortable doing it right now, but I want to do it eventually. And at some point I'll probably just get like fed up, where I'm just like, okay, I think I'm ready. I'm ready to just do this thing. Let's just jump off this hill that I'm on, and we can get it closer to where I want to eventually go. And by setting up those seeds, like slowly but surely, I can transform significant aspects of my life. Okay, 100% productivity for prolonged periods of time is impractical. Well, it depends, right? Like we want to make sure that we're following the science on what allows for productivity. So that might be resting every so long, right? You might want to do a non-sleep deep rest, or do go and look outside, go for a walk. We don't want to go against the science here. We don't want to go against the grain and just like force productivity all the time. Obviously, we need sleep. Sleep is more important than being productive during time that you would otherwise sleep. So, do you ever do anything physical though, like exercise? Yeah, I guess I do exercise during the day. I don't know if I call that free time though. That's I think about exercise like it's part of the system. Like it's part of the system that keeps me going. Like if I'm ever like sad over multiple days, usually I go through in my mind. It's like, okay, let's go back to the checkbook, the checklist. Am I sleeping well? Am I exercising? Am I eating well? And if one of those things are off, it's like, okay, that's an easy thing. We just have to get this on, and chances are I'll be happy soon. But there's a ton of other things. Obviously, like you need vitamin D. You need you need to feel like what you're doing is meaningful during the day. There's so many things that contribute to this. I'm also a weirdo where I'm lucky enough that my level of neuroticism is pretty low, so I don't tend to experience a ton of negative emotion, and yeah, so I think that allows me to do more with my time than I think other people would be comfortable with, which is fine. I'm not ever gonna try to, be judgmental in that way. The document is for every person in whatever situation or scenario they find themselves in, however much free time they find themselves in, however much they feel like they need to be doing something that they find themselves in. Okay, the human mind and body isn't a tireless machine. Even machines need downtime. Right. It's just so yeah. One of the practices that I think I'm going to try to push in this document is probably in part 3, because part 3 talks about morality and the ideas can be like, regardless of what you think is moral, if you think that you could be doing something with your time that would be moral, but it's hard for you to do that, right? What you can do, especially given that everyone's got different personalities, temperament traits that might help them or hurt them. We've got a bunch of different things involved. The thing to do would be to just like play around with it, experiment. Like what gets you to work a little bit more during the day while still feeling like you don't need that extra rest, if that work is going towards something that you think is worth doing. So like play around with like what can get you to do the thing that you think is more moral, and that's going to be kind of a discussion we have in part 3. Like I want this to be a practice that everyone can pick up and start testing out in their own life, and it's going to be a practice of negotiating with your own physiology and brain and personality and identity and God, if you think in that way, and negotiate with the universe. You put something in, you see what it gives back, you keep going. It's going to be it's going to be a constant process of stumbling forward. Or maybe it's just comforting just to think you will do it in the future. Perhaps, yeah. I mean, when I say that, perhaps I pitch that like a tip. And I'm just speculating. I don't know if that's something that only works on me or if that's something that could work on other people. The nice thing about the document here is, for the most part, we're going to keep it to things that we know to be evidenced by science. So I can't just like throw that in there. I can't say like, I have this intuitive trick that works for me. Here it is. Like, I'm only going to be following what we know works. And then from there, I think in the epilogues, maybe we could talk about what like spiritual books suggest might be worth doing, but we just haven't been able to test it in experiments because it would be very difficult to test in experiments. But it seems like people tend to use these effectively in their lives. Like we could talk about all the different things that might work for you. Play around with them. These are things that maybe will work. They don't have as much credence in the like an empirical sense as the science we've been talking about, those tools, but it has credence in the sense that it seems to help a lot of people, and it's part of this teaching or body of wisdom that has been built up over thousands of years. So fair point. Going for walks can be good free time, though. Yeah, going for walks is great. I mean, going for walks, like you could even make it, like in my mind, I can even make that not be a free time activity in the sense of like it's a fun leisure activity. Like it's like watering the plants, but you're the plant. Like when you go for a walk, it's doing like 5 things that are phenomenal for you. Can you easily control good sleep? I cannot, but at least I could go to bed and then just like I can go to bed at the right time. And unfortunately, a lot of times I don't go to sleep immediately. But yeah, I've always had trouble falling asleep. That said, I'm trying to like use the tips that I know will maximize my sleep quality, such as like getting off screens earlier, reading before I go to bed, or having a schedule that is routine. I've been struggling with nightmares for a couple of months. Yeah, so that's one of those ones where, I mean, fortunately I have an experience, but I think that there might be empirically validated tools for getting around that, involving like cognitive behavioral therapy and speaking with a psychiatrist, or writing, or yeah, I'm not sure what actually works there, but I'd imagine that it's something that you could work on for the sake of improving that aspect of your sleep. I think there are meditative mindfulness programs in prison settings. It seems to have an effect. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I'd imagine it would. Yeah, I was blown away hearing about meditation in schools, like as a in terms of like maybe a punishment, like instead of having, I don't know, like a certain type of timeout or something, just having like a meditate. Like honestly, detention should be a meditation. Like that should be meditation time. I mean, you're already giving the kids that type of thing anyway. Like they can't do anything in that room. You might as well have a guided meditation on. I've had trouble falling asleep since I was little too, except the time when I meditated constantly. Meditation could definitely be a solution. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, meditation seems to be pretty great. We'll definitely go farther into that. I'm trying to build a practice, especially in preparation for March, which is going to be our meditation month, but also because I think it'll help me out in this stuff that I'm doing. It'll keep me calm when talking about consciousness. All right, I think I'm going to call it here. 2 hours and a half is probably good. And I'll try to start these streams earlier so that I can go longer and or not feel like I'm losing some of this free time when going longer. But yeah, no, thanks for chilling. Thanks. We'll be continuing. I don't know if we're going to watch more of this. Oh, I didn't even read this. I'm sorry, Darmadon. Actually, we did read that, but I don't think I read all this. But I'm going to keep this tabbed because we might want to look into it. And I don't know if we need to go through the Sam Harris-isms. Inherited advantages is something we were talking about earlier. Choice we have to make. Human conversation as a tool. The most surprising thing. A thing about dreams, consciousness, and its object. What? Okay, so this is all usual Samisms. We don't need to go too far into this. How to get off the ride of anger. It's so easy to tell yourself a story. Unclenching the fist in your mind. Okay, I don't think we need to watch this. I do want to get back to this. I'm curious where Alex is at in terms of his views. I'm manifesting a future collaboration with Alex and Unsolicited Advice, so I got to stay up on where they're at. Also, because they're really important speakers in this space, so I just need to know what's going on in the space. All right, thank you all. Have a good rest of the day, and I will be back tomorrow.